What is the worst thing you ever experienced? Write in the comments what you think about it. What is the worst thing you ever experienced? Enjoy the show. Story 1. Being attacked from behind in Mexico City. Got strangled unconscious. Woke up what I think was about 10-15 minutes later with my wallet and phone gone. Being held up at gunpoint in Rio, where I was walking in the street with a friend. We looked at each other, pushed the gunman to the ground, and ran for our lives. We managed to cross a busy intersection and make our escape. Home invasion at night in my house in Notting Hill. Heard noise from downstairs and walked down barefoot in just my pants and faced a man in the dark. He ran out the door and I ran after him. He managed to get away. No one got hurt. Story 2. The last few years of my life have been spent bouncing all over the US between friends and acquaintances, barely staying afloat, barely keeping myself from ending it all, and constantly living in fear that my next day would be my last, either by the hands of people around me, by my own, or by losing the roof over my head. I had to get away from my abusive family no matter what, because I just couldn't take it any longer, and I've been continuing to pay for it ever since. I have no family, hardly any connections, and I'm still actively sinking where I currently live. Every single day is a nightmare that I fear I won't ever get out of, but I try to keep pushing in the hopes that people were right and that things will eventually get better. That is the worst thing I've ever experienced, and it's something I'm continuing to experience. Gotta love being a disabled person in the great US of A. Am I right? Story 3. I once got this crazy food poisoning. I was puking and shitting till there was nothing left. I remember shitting and my shit was literally like a transparent gel. It was like Vaseline because there was just nothing left for my body to expel. I thought I was gonna die, like I thought I had cholera or something. I was badly dehydrated because I kept shitting and sweating and puking up all the water in my body. I couldn't move for hours and I didn't have my phone. I remember my hands and feet getting tingly and clammy and sweating coldly, and seeing how pale my lips looked in the mirror and thinking someone was gonna find my corpse there, probably in a week or so. But I didn't die. Just kept. I figured I was done. It was all told. I got up. I staggered to my couch and laid down watching The Last Airbender. Fell asleep. Woke up the next morning. Cleaned up my projectile vomiting and other messes I made before making it to the bathroom and carried on. Story 4. My best friend called me and was talking about how shit his life was. So I tried telling him how bad my life was to get a sense of other people have it worse than you, but he came out with shit 20 times worse than what I've went through. He told me about family issues and a lot of death in his family. He was blamed for a lot of things he wasn't a part of or responsible for, plus his parents were divorced. He tried to kill himself 27 times before, but couldn't go through with it. I did the responsible thing and called the cops and sent them to his house because he threatened to KHS. He cussed me out, but I didn't mind because I didn't want him dead. Story 5 recently, when I thought it'd be an okay idea to show up at a guy's place directly after matching plus talking on a dating app. I went to a friend's place and was a bit tipsy. He picked me up from there. We drove around for some time. Then we decided to go to his place. He's a good host, undeniably. He got us drinks, food, and made sure that I was comfortable throughout. I felt comfortable being there. Later, he went for a kiss, and it felt okay to reciprocate, so I went ahead with it. But then, in some time, he put down his pants, and I mentioned that I wasn't comfortable in taking things ahead, to which he agreed. Again, in some time, he tried to initiate a blowjob, and I was reluctant, and I mentioned that I don't want to do it. It was late at night, and I was alone at a dude's place. That seemed scary, too. As in, I kept thinking, why did I put myself in such a scenario? He kept insisting, forcing, and I said okay. But I clearly wasn't willing to. When it started, literally just start, he pushed my head right there. When I tried to resist, he again did the same. I had to push him to protect myself. I felt unsafe, and all that I could think about was to go back home. He could see what he had done. He asked me to not leave at that moment, and because I was so scared and thought that he might do something, I just waited for the sunrise. But I felt really scared. I just kept waiting for the sunrise. I booked a cab soon after the sunrise and got back home. I cried for 3 hours straight. I just hated not having any control and feeling so helpless. I only say it was bad when I'm asked about it by my friends, but how bad? I couldn't leave his place and he had forced himself multiple times on me. I even blamed myself for going to his place. Sighs. I've had a similar experience back in April of 2019 too. I just keep having these encounters that make me trust a guy in bed so difficult. I have my I will protect myself mode on all the time. Sighs. Story 6. I held a dying man in my arms, blood all over me. He was coughing and shaking violently, blood going everywhere. We were the first on scene of a horrific car accident. The man I was holding was ejected from the vehicle. We found him about 30 meters from the vehicle. When paramedics finally arrived, they took over. A fireman saw my blood-soaked shirt and asked if I was okay. I said, yeah, but I was not okay. Still am not okay to this day. I was 20 years old when that happened. I am now 32. Story 7. As a kid-teen, my father being an alcoholic drug addict, he used to walk around the house with a shot to kill himself. Witnessing him in rehab for the first time, he threatened to drown himself in the ocean one night, and my mom packed us up to go drag him out of the sand. I had to pull my drunk father into the car. He came home and shit himself in the shower. My parents separated for a bit. My mom was dating an old high school lover, and my dad came over unannounced for her birthday. Her boyfriend showed up and beat the living hell out of my dad in front of my mom, sister, and brother. He threw my sister and I to the ground. The worst, my dad got into a huge drunken argument with my mom, brother, and I. After some horrible words exchanged, my brother and I found him hanging in the garage. Luckily, he was still alive, unconscious and twitching, but alive. We were able to save him. Now, as an adult, I am pregnant with my second child. I never wanted a second, and it took my 10 years to finally have another. Just got the diagnosis that my baby has cystic fibrosis. It's a terminal disease. I am so scared. Story 8 was visiting family overseas. My relative lives on a busy street, and there was a family crossing the road. The driver came around the corner way too fast and hit the little girl. I watched this all from the bay window looking out the front yard. The car didn't stop, just kept going. I ran out of the house, I have first aid training, and ended up having to perform CPR on her. She was declared dead in the ambulance. Her dad came round a few days later. They lived a block behind my relative to talk to me. He said his wife would like to thank me, but she can't leave the house at the moment. He asked me to come to her funeral. I almost ended up getting fired because I didn't return to work on time because I went, and just broke down. I got to speak to his wife at the funeral, and the same thing happened with her. They are lovely people. CCTV picked up the car. The driver was drunk. Luckily, he didn't fight it. Pled guilty, lifetime driving ban, and a 25-year prison sentence. I still suffer from PTSD from this. Story 9. As a bus driver, I used to drive night shifts from somewhere between 11 p.m. until 7 a.m. on a Sunday at around 5:30 in the morning. I'm doing my last trip of the night. In my city, we have a large bridge to cross to the other side of the city. On the other side, I saw that the police was making people take a breathalyzer. All right, no problem. They usually let me pass without taking it. I'm working after all. I continue along a long road going towards the first big intersection. As I approach, I realize it's very quiet. I was the only one driving there, except for this police van that was slowly ghost riding towards me. Me being confused as fuck as to why this guy is driving on the wrong side of the road, I lower my speed a bit to see if he wants to say something. He passes me very slowly and makes a hand gesture that looked something like, "All good, carry on." As he is about to pass me, I hear a very loud bang on the back of my bus. Me again, not understanding what happened, I bring the bus to a stop. I look to my right and see someone with his hoodie up running away full speed. He was booking it. I look in my side mirror and see his motorcycle in pieces. I did not realize there were actually two bangs, and there was another person with his motorcycle that crashed into my bus. At some point, I do realize this, and by this time police and ambulance were already swarming, and I start walking towards the back of the bus. As I do, some doctor stops me and says I perhaps don't want to do that, since that person has passed away, probably dead on impact. The guy in the hoodie got caught by the police later. In hindsight, I started to realize a lot more things. Those two were probably running away from the police alcohol test and were hitting speeds up to 100 to 120 kilometers per h. Mind you, this was a 50 kilometers per h road with 2 lanes going into one direction. They saw my bus, probably wanted to pass me, and then were met by a police van they didn't expect to be there. The guy that died was 25 years old and had a 2-year-old daughter then. A shame, really. Story 10. The recuperation from my suicide attempt. I overdosed myself on pills, and not only did I go through a 3-month coma full of nightmares and constant physical pain, headaches, eye burning, itches, and breathing issues, but when I woke up, I wasn't allowed to drink anything for at least 3 weeks. That was absolute hell. My mouth felt like sandpaper. I was extremely tired all the time, very dizzy, and I had almost no strength. Also, I had to use this weird shower pack thing to clean myself. It friggin' burned the heck out of me, but they swore it had to be hot for it to be useful. Story 11. My wife of 10 years turning into a narcissistic abuser who cheated on me, took the kids, then brought them back and has basically washed her hands of being a mother. She flakes on them all the time now. Our eldest doesn't want her coming to his karate practice anymore. The younger is having nightmares of people leaving him. I have gotten them into counseling, but they have turned from kids who are loving and caring and keen for school to kids that don't want to leave the house, stay with me all the time, and are lashing out. A close second is the scream of anguish she made when we lost a pregnancy to miscarriage. They would have been 7 by now. Thinking of this all this time later still upsets me. We had another child afterwards, but that moment of complete loss. Story 12. Pain-wise, an ingrown nail, it pooled blood under the nail and hurt like a bitch to take out. But nothing will ever compare to missing out on my teen years. I lost my home twice, all my belongings, my GF at the time, friends, school, and lived in poverty for years. During what was supposed to be my best years, I was miserable. I was robbed of time. I'll never get back. Story 13. Finding out my mom died after living with end-stage renal failure for years. I remember asking my boyfriend if he was joking because I genuinely couldn't comprehend the words coming out of his mouth. Sitting outside of my dad's house while she lay dead in her bed because no one was allowed inside until the coroners came to collect her. The workers coming out after examining her to ask if anyone wanted to say goodbye. I was the only one who got up, but my feet wouldn't move. My sister-in-law walked me inside, into her room, and held me as I cried to her that I couldn't do it. She reassured me I didn't have to, that she'd carry me back outside if she needed to. I finally worked up the courage to look at her, and she looked like she was sleeping, but one of her eyes was half open. Her beautiful blue eye was empty. Leaning down to hug her and kiss her cheek one last time. She was so cold. She hated being cold. I had seen her the night before, and she wasn't feeling well. I remember the sinking feeling I had when I hugged and kissed her goodnight. I told my boyfriend I was worried about her but reassured myself she'd be okay since she had dialysis the next day. She never made it to dialysis. The coroner collected her jewelry from her body before taking her and gave it to my dad. My dad asked me if I wanted her butterfly ring, the one she wore 24/7. It felt wrong to take it because it was her favorite. Having to hug my niece and tell her I had no answer to her question about what happened to Grandma, because I didn't even know. No one did. It seemed sudden. My sister told me, a year later, and the night before my 21st birthday, that my mom had known her dialysis had stopped working in September. She died in October. She purposely kept it a secret. I still find myself angry at her for robbing me of my chance to be there when she passed like she knew I wanted to be. I know she probably didn't want to hurt anyone, but ultimately all she did was cause more pain. I devoted years of my life to making sure she stayed alive, and she didn't even let me say goodbye. It hurts, even nearly 4 years later. Story 14. We were in a quad with another couple, so it's 2 married couples. We have been village parenting with them for a while. Yesterday morning, Nikki called me at work because their daughter looked sick, and they wanted to go to the ER. I jumped in my car, picked them up, but by the time she looked so green and was foaming at the mouth. I've never driven like that in my life. Once at the ER, I dropped them off and had to go back to work. All through the day, I was getting messages about how much worse it was getting. My wife and I made the decision that I would stay home and take care of our daughter, and my wife would go to the hospital. That night, our partner's daughter died unexpectedly. We lost a little girl we considered our daughter, and the other couple imploded. Hug your kids as often as you can. Story 15. Was in bed with a guy after a couple nice dates. Things seemed okay. He was huge, like a big muscular guy. And not long after we started to have sex, he got really rough with me out of turn blue, was pulling my hair really hard and hurting me, and I told him to stop because I was in pain. But when I looked in his eyes, there was nothing there. I just had to wait until he was done, and I kind of froze. When he was finished, he has dripped his sweat all over me. A chunk of my hair lay on the pillow, and my vagina was bleeding. He immediately got up to take a shower. I told him I was bleeding, and he replied with, "You're probably on your period." No, I wasn't, I assured him. It took me almost a decade to call it rape. Thankfully, I had some good therapists to help me with it. Story 16. My dad took his life in 2004. He was a long-haul trucker and overdosed on muscle relaxers and antidepressants in the sleeper cab of his truck. I was 22 and almost 8 months pregnant with my first child when he died. I remember calling him that day because it was Father's Day, and as soon as his answering machine picked up and he had reset it to its factory generic message it comes with, I just had this sick feeling. He had attempted the year before, but at home, and my mom had found him and got him to the hospital in time to save him. So when I heard the reset message, my heart just knew. He was a really great dad, and 20 years later I still miss him every day, and I'm sorry his demons couldn't have let him stay longer. Story 17. Too many, unfortunately. I lost my oldest brother to suicide 10 years ago, then my 17-year-old son died in a car crash. That one has basically fucked me up for good. And in the last 4 years I lost both my parents. Life can cut you to the bone and leave you with nothing. I wish I could say I'm doing fine, but that would be a lie. I live day to day trying to do my best with what's left in my life. All the best to anyone suffering, Luz. My heart goes out to you. Story 18. When I got the call letting me know my dad had died suddenly in the middle of the night, it triggered such an intense dissociative episode that I wound up additionally traumatized by the sound of my own screams. It was like I was trapped in a room watching myself break down. This was only made worse by his funeral. I didn't want to be in the room with the body because I knew I was barely hanging on by a thread. People pressured me into the room, and guess what? I was right about not being able to handle that. I had horrible panic attacks and nightmares for months, and would get hit with the depersonalization and derealization types of dissociation over the slightest things for about a year. I could barely leave the house because the episodes were so severe, and I had no access to medical care or real support. Worst year of my entire life. Story 19. Heartbreak. Significant other cheating was bad. Worse heartbreak is finding out your kid has a genetic mutation that is degenerative, and I'm likely to outlive her. She will never have a normal life and will be childlike in mental capacity forever. There's nothing I can do to fix it other than give her as much love and good memories until her body stops functioning. Seizures. Heart failure. Torn between giving her what I can while not leaving the other child to feel abandonment or less love. Feeling like you're letting one down all of the time? Life sucks sometimes. Story 20. When I still lived at my parents' house, I had 2 sulcata tortoises, common pet species, shouldn't be but can be cared for adequately by serious committed keepers. My 2 were about 60 pounds each. As we're in Canada, I was keeping them in a large greenhouse set up in the backyard for the colder winter months. The greenhouse caught fire, and I was woken up by the sound of my mother screaming and explosions. There was a couple of milk crates full of 1-pound propane tanks nearby. By the time I got out there, the greenhouse was fully engulfed, and the propane tanks were exploding one by one. I tried so hard to get to my boys, but the flames were just too hot. Firefighters took their sweet-ass time putting the fire out, sauntering up the wrong side of the house, casually moseying about hooking up hoses. Pieces of shit. When they finally put out the fire and we could get to the tortoises, one of them was still alive, shell fully burnt to a crisp and clearly in agony. Was about to ask a cop on scene to shoot him in the head when he finally succumbed to his injuries. Absolute worst day of my life, and definitely suffer major PTSD from it. My local reptile community came together to help me rebuild and acquire 2 new baby tortoises, who are 80 pounds each now, 6 years later. I have since acquired 4 more, and have a large country property with acres for them to roam. Hug your pets. Story 21. Physical. Hell's itch. Worst physical experience of my life. I've had kidney stones. I've had broken bones. I've been stabbed. I've had teeth pulled without anesthesia. I've had subal ear infections progress to my jaw. This is something that's not describable or even comparable. Imagine a sunburn across your back. Just a normal sunburn. Then you get itchy. So itchy. But it also feels like your skin is tearing away, and it is excruciating. If you touch it to scratch, it's indescribable the pain, and every tear is itchy. And you tear every time you move or breath or think about it. Your back looks fine, but it won't stop. It's like little fire ants crawling under your skin, biting their way out. And it's constant. There is no relief. There is no stopping it. So you lay in a ball and cry and scream because it's so damn itchy and so damn painful, you can't not focus on it. Turns out pain and itch are the same receptors. So the only way to stop the itch is with a worse pain. So you sit there for hours. You do the hottest water you can find to get some kind of escape from it. But it never comes, because water makes it so much worse the second you get out. The nerves are damaged from the sun, and can't stop the histamine reaction to the sunburn. So your body is flooding your back with histamines, and the thing that tells it to stop is not working. So you're just flooded with the constant, endless, painful itch and cracking as your body panics, not knowing what to do and thinks you're allergic to your own skin, but also can't tell the difference between skin being irritated or trying to escape. Thinking about it brought back the itch. God, how I hate remembering that itch. It is hell. 6 days of endless, sleepless, constant waking hell. The itch. That goddamn itch. Enough to make a guy crazy. I can still feel the fire ants under my skin sometimes when I don't have a shirt on, like they're waiting for the right time to return suddenly, and without warning to finish chewing their way out. Thank you very much for watching. If you liked the video, like it, be sure to write comments and share your stories.